To all local and international guests, my co-presenters, participants, and panelists, good afternoon. My name is Ronel Rabi Duyagit from the Philippines, and I'm currently enrolled in Polytechnic University of the Philippines Open University System, taking up Masters in Business Administration with specialization in Human Resource Management. At the same time, I'm currently working as a full-time assistant manager of Solaire Rewards Club under the Casino Marketing Division in Solaire Resort North. That is why the title of my narrative literature review is Work-Life Balance, Motivation, and Employee Well-Being in Integrated Resorts, a narrative literature review. To start with the background of the study, I have categorized this into three contexts, which is the Western context, individualism and transactional exchange, the Asian context, collectivism, phase, and emotional labor, and the Philippine context, malasakit, resilience, and the BPO parallel. The gaming industry's revenue imperatives are universal, but the human cost is culturally specific. While Western employees may seek work-life balance through boundaries and rights, and Asian employees may view work as a duty, Filipino employees navigate a complex mix of malasakit, economic necessity, and resilience. This narrative literature review aims to synthesize these diverse threads to propose a more culturally nuanced approach to employee well-being in integrated resorts. And the objectives of this study are to compare and contrast the conceptualization of work-life balance and the primary work-life balance stressors encountered by the casino employees' Western and Asian cultural contexts. Second, to identify and categorize the dominant motivational drivers, example is extrinsic versus intrinsic, familial versus individual rights that influence employee performance and tenure across the three cultural settings within the 24/7 casino environment. Third, to analyze the psychological impact of culturally specific factors, such as the Western emphasis on the right to disconnect, the Asian necessity of faith and emotional labor, and the Filipino concepts of malasakit on the overall well-being of integrated resort gaming staff. Lastly, to propose a synthesized framework or model that incorporates these cultural nuances to inform more effective and culturally sensitive management strategies aimed at enhancing employee well-being in the global integrated resort industry. The framework of this study is primary model. The JDR or Job Demands Resources model is a well-established framework in the occupational health psychology that possesses every occupational has its own risk factors and protective factors. Second, motivational foundation, self-determination theory or the SDT, provide the theoretical depth of your motivation, variable by distinguishing between autonomous and controlled motivation, which is heavily influenced by culture. And third, integrating the framework, the moderating role of culture. The combination of two models is essential because they show two, two pathways leading to well-being, avoiding stress, and achieving fulfillment. The framework specifically argues that the impact of job demands and job resources on well being and motivation is moderated by cultural values and expectations. And the methodology of this study, the study employs a systemic narrative literature review methodology structured in three main stages to address the objectives and synthesize culturally diverse literature. On the first stage, search strategy or identification, utilize primary academic databases including Scopus, Web of Science, and EBS co-host. Focus on literature published within the last 10 years. On the second stage, it's the selection and extraction. Inclusion criteria sources must be peer reviewed and explicitly focus on casino or gaming staff and address at least two of the three core variables, which is the work life balance, motivation, and well being. Exclude generic hospitality, hotel only studies, short news articles, and non English texts. On the last stage, synthesis and analysis is framed by the combined job demands resources and self determination theory. Comparative analysis for objectives 1 and 2 contrast findings on work life balance stressors and motivational driver between the Western and Asian Philippine contexts. Thematic analysis for objective number 3, identify and analyze the psychological impact of culturally specific factors such as Western, right to disconnect, Asian, face and emotional labor, Philippines, malasakit and resilience. Framework proposal for objective number 4, synthesize the findings to propose a culturally nuanced framework for enhancing well-being in the global IR sector. The result and discussion. First objective, comparison of work-life balance stressors. The literature reveals a fundamental difference in how work-life balance conflict manifests between Western and Asian integrated resort casino employees centered on boundary theory versus role conflict. The primary work-life balance stressor in Western IRs is boundary infringement. The rigid 24/7 casino schedule conflicts directly with the individualistic pursuit of autonomous time. Conversely, in Asian IRs, the stressor of the stressor is role conflict, particularly between the professional duty to the organization and familial obligations, which is internalized as a necessary yet exhausting job demand. Second, identification of dominant motivational drivers. Motivational drivers across three contexts align closely with the continuum of self determination theory, ranging from purely controlled to highly identified motivation. Motivation in the IR casino setting is globally high in extrinsic rewards such as pay, tips, or bonuses, but autonomous intrinsic component varies culturally. Western employees seek motivation through the fulfillment of autonomy, while Asian and Philippine employees are motivated primarily by relatedness. Duty to the organization or duty to family. For the Philippine context, this becomes identified regulation, a form of controlled motivation where the value is accepted as important, linking the personal sacrifice to a higher family goal. On the third objective, analysis of psychological impact of cultural factors. Culturally specific values significantly moderate the relationship between casino stressors and the employee well-being outcomes. The same demand results in different coping mechanisms and psychological tools. The most critical finding is how cultural moderators transform from nature of strain. The Western emphasis on right to disconnect makes lack of control a direct psychological injury or burnout. The Asian necessity for face converts high emotional labor into emotional exhaustion, due to suppression. In the Philippines, the value of malasakit acts as a voluntary psychological buffer, allowing employees to endure high demands but ultimately to delayed delayed reporting of stress and self-exploitation. On the last objectives, proposal of a synthesized framework. Based on the comparative synthesis, this review proposes a culturally nuanced JDR model or IR management. The proposed framework integrates cultural values as explicit moderators between job resources and motivation well-being. It stipulates that resources must be culturally meaningful to effectively combat demands. For Western IRs, resources must target autonomy, such as flexible schedule software, control over tips, and for Asian IRs, resources must target relatedness and competence, such as strong team bonding, clear hierarchy, high prestige training. And for the Philippine IRs, resources must target relatedness or familism. Example is that comprehensive family health benefits, educational support for children to reciprocate the employee's malasakit. Into the conclusion. First, the universality of stressors is moderated by culture. The primary finding is that while the job demands of the 24/7 casino environment, example is emotional labor, in inflexible shifts surveillance are universal. Their psychological impact and effectiveness of mitigating job resources are entirely culture dependent. The one size fits all HR approach is obsolete. Management strategies for successfully enhance work-life balance in Western IRs, example maximizing scheduling autonomy, will likely fail in Asian contexts if they ignore the deeply ingrained value of duty and collective harmony. Work life balance conflict is conceptually diverse. The Western context, work life balance conflict is primarily boundary infringement. The Asian and Philippine context, work life balance conflict is primarily role strain, such as clash between professional duty and familial social obligations. Conclusion number two. Motivation shifts from autonomy to relatedness. The theoretical framework informed by self-determination theory confirms that the dominant motivational drivers for IR staff are not purely intrinsic but are anchored in different basic psychological needs and across cultures. Extrinsic rewards are necessary but not sufficient. While high pay and tips are essential for recruiting casino staff globally, sustained well-being requires fulfilling specific psychological needs. For the Western staff, demand fulfillment of autonomy, while on the Asian and Filipino staff, primarily seek fulfillment of relatedness, duty to the organization or familialism. Motivation to sacrifice work-life balance is a rational choice linked to supporting the collective. And to the third conclusions, cultural values act as a double-edged swords for well-being. Culturally valued behaviors, while beneficial for service delivery, can paradoxically mask or exacerbate employee strain, posing a serious challenge to accurate well-being measurement. Malasakit and resilience. In the Philippines context, the value of malasakit enables extraordinary service but leads to self-exploitation and high levels of silent stress. The characteristic Filipino resilience often delays employees from seeking help until severe burnout occurs, resulting in hidden well-being crises. These recommendations suggest pathways for future research to expand the findings behind the casino floor to other high-demand global industries. First, develop and validate culturally nuanced instruments. Researchers should focus on developing and validating context-specific psychological scales that accurately measure well-being moderators rooted in local values. On a wider application, this is essential for multinational service industries such as BPO centers, global healthcare, or logistics. A scale for measuring the Malasakit paradox could be adapted to measure equivalent concepts like martyr syndrome in other collectivist settings, providing a more accurate measure of hidden workplace strain than generic burnout scales. On the second recommendation, expand the integrated JDR and SDT framework. Future empirical studies should implicitly test the proposed culturally nuanced JDR model by using cultural values such as individualism and collectivism as a formal moderator variables. On the wider application, apply this integrated framework to understand motivational shifts in global remote workforces. For example, how does the autonomy gained by working from home conflict with cultural expectation of relatedness in different countries? On the third one, investigate the ethics of cultural motivation. Ethics researchers should critically examine the managerial practice of leveraging culturally ingrained values to drive performance. On a wider application, the line between using identified regulation concept where the employee accepts a value is important and facilitating self-exploitation needs clearer ethical boundaries in fields where employees are highly motivated by necessity. This research is crucial for shaping fair global labor policies. And now for the laws, ordinances, and policies supported by the study. Firstly, global time autonomy and boundary control. Policy focus, the right to disconnect. Legislation. The findings on Western employees is high demand for autonomy and the resulting burnout from boundary infringement validate the necessity validate the necessity of these policies. Second, occupational safety and health standards or OSH. Policy focus is international and local standards governing night work and hazardous environments. The findings on long hours, shift work, and high stress, emotional labor, and malasakit sacrifice among Asian and Filipino staff demonstrate the ongoing strain. And lastly, responsible gaming program requirements. Casino licensing and regulatory mandates often require staff to monitor and intervene in problem gambling. The study shows Asian and Filipino staff are highly vulnerable to the stress of this role conflict. For the new systems and processes generated, I have three here. First, reciprocity based HR and benefits system. Systematically link job resources to the employee's primary cultural motivator. In the Philippine IRs, implement familial centric benefits such as educational grants, extended dependent health coverage to directly reciprocate the sacrifice driven by familialism and malasakit. While on the Asian IRs, prioritize status and training resources to, to reinforce relatedness and duty, such as high performance certifications, clear advancement paths. Second, shift specific decompression protocols. Mandating structured decompression routines to address emotional exhaustion identified in the Asian literature due to phase. Action requires the system to track high pressure shifts and, automatically trigger a mandatory short derolling period with peer support before the employee leaves the premises. And lastly, customized well-being assessment tools. Development of culturally sensitive HR surveys that measure context-specific strain, moving beyond generic burnout scales. Action tip. Action. The system must include items that assess the extent of surface acting emotional suppression for Asian context and the pressure felt to exhibit malasakit despite personal fatigue for the Philippine context. And lastly, utilization of the study by the stakeholders. Stakeholders group are the integrated resort management, HR, and the operations. How to utilize the study. This evidence-based blueprint redesigns compensation work-life balance policies to reduce turnover by linking resources directly to cultural motivators such as benefits for malasakit. Second stakeholder, labor unions and worker advocates provide evidence for targeted policies like familism supporting benefits in the Philippines and right to disconnect in the West protections. And academic researchers validates the culturally nuanced JDR model or SDT, shifting global service research to context-specific stressors and resources. And these are some of the references that are being used in the study. Again, my name is Ronel Duyagit, and thank you for listening. Good afternoon.